Welcome to this PayTrace webinar. My name is Sam Johnson. I'll be the host today. And joining me is my colleague, Carlton Ortega. Welcome, Carlton. Excited to have you on here.
Excited to be on, Sam. Thanks for having me.
So today we're going to be talking a little bit about PayTrace, right? But really we're going to be diving into one of our solutions, which is our product called Trace AR for Acumatica. So really excited to showcase you guys today. If you're watching live, please hop in if you have questions, comments, or emotional outbursts. Carlton and I are here to tackle those for you today and make sure that you have all the answers that you need. If you are watching this on our recording on our YouTube channel, definitely we're going to give you some contact information at the end of this. So check that out. Look in the description. We're going to have lots of links and resources for you. So if you are new to this, I see a few new names on here. So special welcome to you guys. You will notice you are muted. So if you do have those questions, there's a Q&A panel on the Zoom box here. Please utilize that. We're going to be kind of watching that as we progress through this webinar. So without further ado, I do want to give a little bit of extra introduction on to who we are as your presenters. So my name's Sam Johnson. I'm the Partner Success Manager here at PayTrace. And my role within the organization is really to ensure that all of our partners, whether it's sales partners, processing partners, and even a lot of cases our users, have all of the tools, the access, and the resources that they need to be successful and to be able to utilize and maximize PayTrace to its fullest. So, really excited to meet some of you all. And then, as I mentioned before, Carlton Ortega, who's our lead solutions engineer, is here. Carlton, I know you're very humble, but I like to think he's the smartest guy at the company, to be honest. He does all of our solutioning for a lot of our prospects, a lot of our users. If you are going to be on an Acumatica demo or one of our other ERP solutions, very strong chance you're going to be working very closely with Carlton. So, Carlton, welcome.
Again, thank you, Sam, for having me, and thank you as well for those kind words.
Perfect. So, what are we going to be talking about today? The agenda is pretty light. Really, we're going to be getting into some of the manual payment challenges that a lot of Acumatica users and really just any sort of business that relies on accounts receivable payments run into today. So we're going to address some of those, and then we're going to solution that. Specifically for Acumatica, we have a demo prepared for you all today. So we're going to take 15-20 minutes to actually show you exactly what PayTrace looks like within native Acumatica, so that all of our users can process as efficiently as possible. And then lastly, again, we're going to carve out probably 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how much engagement there is for some Q&A. So without further ado, let's dive into some of the issues that are out there currently and some of the trends that PayTrace has been picking up on. So AR. There hasn't been a huge evolution of AR pretty much over the last few decades. Even with the rise of technology and ERPs, there's still a lot of use of, unfortunately, a lot of manual paper processes, right? Kind of your traditional invoicing where you print it out on a piece of paper, stuff it in an envelope, and then hope that you get some money back eventually. And that's one of the biggest challenges I think a lot of merchants are facing today are these traditional slow payment cycles, where oftentimes if we are billing on invoice, it can take on average about a month, right? 30 days to pay, and that's pretty common. We'd expect that. A lot of, merchants have net 30 payment terms, but even now we're seeing a lot of data that suggests that that's slowing down even more. In fact, a lot of payments aren't being received until day 60 or later, which is a big deal, especially in the current economy where inflation is pretty high. There's a lot of disruptions in, trade with things like tariffs and otherwise, where we want to make sure that we have liquidity, right? You have money in the bank so that you can reinvest into the business instead of having to finance against that. So we want to look at how can we speed up those payment cycles to give more money back into our accounts, right? Another challenge that we're running into quite a bit is we're seeing kind of this disconnected buying experience, right? Where on the receivable side, there's a lot of kind of lag in technology adoption where, um, right, it's very manual, it's very archaic. Whereas on the buying side, on the payable side, there's this kind of shift in how they want to pay, right? Nobody wants to pay by kind of the old formatted paper checks. It's tedious, it's a lot of work, and there's a lot of risk for human error. So buyers, right, our customers want more modern ways to make those payments, right? They have a very strong appetite for that, and that's actually going to be um, right one of the buying cues whether or not they want to work with right a certain vendor or another one is how simple it is to be able to make a payment. And then lastly, there's just this demand for B2B e-commerce growth, right? As we look at how right our businesses are evolving, how we are selling products, right? We want to make sure that our sales arm and our receivables arms are really working together, right? When they're not playing together, there's a lot of risk for error, and there's a lot of disruption where there's a lack of collaboration within an organization. So we want to make sure that there's visibility between all of our different solutions, right? It's the reason why we adopt these types of ERPs so that we can have full visibility. But when a huge piece of that puzzle with payments isn't included, that can create a lot of issues. So those are a lot of the challenges that we're seeing primarily around the lack of digital payments. So just to kind of paint a little bit of a better picture, we put together this really cool infographic on here. It kind of shows you what the step-by-step process looks like for accounts receivable without automation. And then what does that look like when you do adopt an automated solution like PayTrace? So I hate reading through this. It takes forever for me just to read through this 10-step process. So you can imagine how awful it is to actually live this in real life if you're trying to do a manual invoice. I kind of mentioned how this flows, but right, if you are on the finance side, if you're a controller, this may resonate with you, right? When a business, right, they make a sale, that should be the time that we celebrate. But it really just kind of kicks things off, right? So then we have to actually prepare and deliver an invoice. Delivery could be stuffing envelopes, printing stuff out in an office, and then hoping that our mail carrier, right? USPS is great, but they can take a few days. I actually have a letter down in my entrance here that went to the wrong person, so I have to get that back in the mail. Who knows where our invoice is going, right? We have zero visibility on that once it's out of our hands. And then it's just the waiting game, right? Time's going to pass. We hope that our customer receives it. And even if they do receive it pretty quickly, they're going to have to route that through the correct processes, right? So they have to get that to the right person to approve, to cut the check, and then again to mail the check. And hopefully that gets back to our office in the right way. And then finally, we actually have to deposit that money and then reconcile that within our accounts. All of that takes a long time to explain. And like I mentioned before, on average, usually between 28 to 45 days, we're seeing that trending even higher currently. So it's a big issue, right? And a lot of folks aren't necessarily thinking of that just because it's the status quo. It's how things have always been. So with that, what we've done is we've brought, a few different solutions to market. Today, we're going to be talking about how that works within native Acumatica. But, right, automation essentially occurs from the time we make the sale. All of these other processes occur within PayTrace and it's instantaneous, right? We can get that invoice into the hands of the customer within seconds. They can pay that within seconds and that can be deposited and posted right away. So, some of the data that we're gathering is that 80% of digital invoices are being received within 1 week, which is, a huge benefit. So, with all of that said, we can kind of have this nebulous icon here saying that we do a bunch of stuff. But rather than kind of allude to it, I'm going to pass the reins over to my colleague Carlton, where we can see this solution in action. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sam. And then if you can answer everyone's favorite question, can you let me know when you can see our Acumatica screen?
It's loading. Got it.
Perfect, perfect. So I could talk about Acumatica, what we bring to Acumatica for hours upon hours. So I'll try to keep this demo short and sweet, but I do encourage everyone after the call to set up some time with our team so we can go a little bit more into the weeds on what we do offer. I think I'm only scraping the surface and really highlighting the core functionalities that we do have. But understandably, when we look at specific use cases, there's always better conversation and a lot more functionality that we can show on the back end. In terms of what I'll be showing you today, we'll first start with our setup. So what does it look like once the Paytrace application is in your environment? And then how can Paytrace support you in making sure everything works from the get-go? Two is we'll take a look at the normal process of generating a sales order or a sales invoice, depending on your organization's needs, and then how we can leverage that automation that Sam mentioned by using maybe some saved cards prior or maybe payment link that's built in natively within Acumatica. And then we'll close out with our latest feature, which is our reconciliation tool. This tool is my favorite. That's why I save it towards the end. It gives you, the merchant, the ability to bring in bank statements, bring in deposits from however you're receiving that, as well as the Paytrace batches on anything you've processed with the Paytrace platform, reconcile directly within Acumatica and try to line up those batches with specific transactions, just so that maybe some other team down the road that needs to reconcile, they'll have a little bit easier of a process and what it might entail for them in their day-to-day. Starting with that first section that I mentioned, let's go ahead and see what it looks like to set up Paytrace within your environment. So we are set up as a processing center. All of this is probably complete nonsense and irrelevant to you unless you're a Paytrace merchant. But what we will do is we'll set up an implementation team to walk through creating your Paytrace account, whether sandbox or production, drop in all of those credentials into the screen we have here, and then make sure that everything is working from the get-go. So ensuring that this test credentials here at the top works once we do drop everything into a processing center.
And just to really quick interrupt on this point, Carlton, when an existing Acumatica user wants to use Paytrace for the payment processing,
Mhm.
roughly how long does it actually take to connect that account?
To connect the account, immediate. We can hop on a 15-minute call, or we even hide online through our Paytrace help page to essentially walk you through everything in the event you don't want to meet with our team. So it takes minutes. If we're looking at a full implementation plan of putting it into your lower environment, doing validation testing and going to production, that one can range anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks. We've had some merchants go live in 2 weeks because they need it immediately, but we've also had those merchants that are a little bit longer on the tail end. They like to do a lot of validation, and those are closer towards the 12 weeks. But we're always happy to support no matter how long it takes a merchant to go live.
And that's usually at the determination of the merchant themselves, kind of what that timeline looks like.
Exactly. We'll go at their pace. We are in no rush to get them live. Once they're comfortable and ready to go, we are as well.
Nice. Love it.
Great question, Sam. And then the second piece of the setup is around our automation tools. So understandably, you as a merchant, you might have specific credit terms tied to your customers. This is a very standard Acumatica page, but the piece I do want to highlight here is if you look towards the bottom, there is a pay trace section, which is an auto capture order payments. And then if enabled, you do have three different things you can enable here on shipment release, break on error. So in the event any capture fails, we stop the processing there, or once it enters an invoice status. So I won't go into the weeds on this one because you will see this on the automation piece of it, which segues us perfectly into our customers. I'll go ahead and open up my demo CO test customer here. And it'll be this customer that I use for the remainder of the demo. Once our application is installed within your environment, you'll notice that there is a Paytrace wallet that does get introduced. And I always like to pause on this page because some people are concerned about keeping sensitive card data within your Acumatica environment, but I always alleviate that concern by saying anytime a credit card is entered or even ACH into your Acumatica environment, we are never exposing your environment to any sensitive card data. So when we look at this from a PCI perspective, never does a real 16-digit PAN of a Visa ever get exposed on any screen other than the one tokenization process, which we keep out of scope within Acumatica. So on the screen we have in front of us here, you can see I have two Visas saved, one expired, which is why it's no longer active, as well as a MasterCard, and then the tokenized number or the tokenized ID that we store. So once we do look at the automation, what are we using for that saved credit card? In this case, it'll be that second Visa. You can, of course, save as many cards or ACHs as you wish. So in the event someone does want to save one, two, or even 100, you can, of course, populate that on that and then choose your default for processing. As we navigate to our sales orders, we'll go ahead and do something that your organization does within their day-to-day. Again, we're looking at this more from a sales order perspective, but in the event you only do digital goods and you don't actually generate sales orders, everything I'm doing now is completely applicable. It's just that you would remove the pick, pack, and ship of taking things out of a warehouse or maybe procurement or anything of that sort. Let's use our CO test customer and let's add in a sample line item here. So let's go ahead and purchase or sell, depending on the perspective, an Acer computer. The moment you save this sales order, you will have two different scenarios on the way you can accept payment. You can click this button here at the top, which is creating a payment link. So in the event you don't want to receive this credit card over the phone, or you don't have a credit card saved already to the customer record, you can of course email the payment link out to your customer for them to receive in their email inbox based off of a preset Acumatica template, and then the customer can make payment on that accord. But I'll skip over this requirement because I do want to show the automation tools that we have within Acumatica. So I instead go to our payments tab here and click create payment. You'll notice that the payment method is defaulted to PayTrace because that is our default processing center. There is a button for a new card. So again, if for whatever reason the customer wanted to process a new card here, you can always do that from that screen. But by default, we're taking that saved Visa credit card starting with 4111111 for the specific order. I can capture the payment outright, or I can authorize the payment at this step. I'll pause here for a brief second because I think this specific step is very critical based off of an organization's needs. Some organizations like to only authorize at the time of creating the sales order and capture once it leaves the warehouse or the shipment is completed. Some organizations like to capture and or authorize and capture at the beginning and do nothing at any later steps. And then you have the third scenario where some organizations like to authorize and capture all the way at the tail end. So irrespective of what your organization does today and your preferences, we'll accommodate that and we'll always respect that requirement. So currently, you're seeing one specific process where I only want to authorize this sales order. But again, you can perform this step at any specific point in time, depending on how you currently accept payments. So we'll give Acumatica some time to think here and process the pre-authorization. And I will open up the chat screen in the event any questions do come up in the meantime.
I have questions, or at least maybe comments.
Yes.
You know, I always have something here, Carlton. Um, so what I really like about this process that you're showing is one, you can have multiple payment methods stored on file within native Acumatica. I know with a lot of other Acumatica solutions, they're having to store that kind of in an offsite location and then potentially run the payment and then import reporting into Acumatica. But correct me if I'm wrong, we never really need to leave our native site.
We never do. And that's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up, Sam. As you look at everything I'm doing within Acumatica today, you'll notice these are the Acumatica screens. This is the place you live in, you breathe in, and you do all of your day-to-day processes. We never want you to leave Acumatica unless you want to create a daily report on the PayTrace gateway or view transactions in real time in the event you don't have access to Acumatica. But other than that, we want to keep you embedded within Acumatica and introduce all of the payments, the tokenization, whatever it looks like on these Acumatica screens. Thanks for that, Sam. So we'll go ahead and proceed with the sales order. So this could be the pick, pack, and ship. This could be the procurement. This can be whatever your organization does once it does move through the standard shipment process, which PayTrace does not touch. So we'll kind of create the shipment, confirm the shipment, and then finally get to the invoice step where PayTrace comes into play one more time. The thing I'll highlight before we prepare this invoice is, if you remember, the very first payment event that we processed was an authorization. And one of the settings we had is a pay trace capture on shipment release or on invoice. So the moment that we invoice this order, you'll notice that our authorization actually moves to a captured state. So let's go ahead and prepare this invoice and generate that sales invoice. This invoice is technically open. It's still within a balanced state, but if I go to my applications header here, you'll notice that the processing status for this specific open authorization has now been captured. So if we look at the whole payment ecosystem and the payment flow, we started with a sales order that was authorized because maybe we want to hold money before we ship out the goods. The moment we shipped out the goods and the moment we invoiced is when we want to capture that and introduce that to our end of day settlement so that your organization gets paid, let's say this 500 next day or within 2 days, whatever your funding cycle looks like. The moment you release this specific invoice, Acumatica does its standard process, and now we're moving this invoice into a closed status. So depending on the setup you have that we saw in the beginning, if you want to capture on shipment release or capture on invoice, we'll control whenever we send this capture status. Or maybe you don't like these features at all. Maybe you want your team to control each and every step with a manual authorization and a manual capture. You can always do that because you do see these fields here where you can capture payment or even void a payment if needed. One thing I'll also highlight on the sales order processes, we've had some merchants and some requirements around lump sum payments. So maybe there's 20, 30, even 100 outstanding payments on a customer's record that they don't want to have to go into each and every one and do the process I just did in front of you now. So what we have done is if you go into payments and applications and you go and create a new payment and application, find whatever customer it is that might have outstanding invoices. And you can see here that my specific customer has 4 invoices, and I can click all of these invoices, and you'll see the amount here populate or increase or decrease depending on what you're doing. And if you were to put a 1,005.60 payment here and save that, what you can do is you can authorize or capture at this step, and you're essentially applying a lump sum payment across multiple invoices to hopefully save you some effort of manually going into each and every one and then applying payment against that. So we'll give Acumatica again some time to think around this payment and then make sure it's applying the relevant entries within Acumatica, closing out those invoices, and then doing the application history as part of that.
And just to confirm, Carlton, I'm seeing on this page, right, it's showing under that card account line, the Visa ending in 41111. That's essentially capturing it against that payment method, correct?
That is correct. So if you remember the card we have saved to default at the customer record screen, this would be that card. So if you notice, I never chose a card. I never added a card. I can always add a new card, but I didn't do that for this step. We're using whatever is ticked under that default section here.
Nice.
And then we'll move away from more of the sales order process because I do want to show you that bank payment reconciliation tool that is arguably my favorite. And this was a recent enhancement that we just pushed out. If we go into Acumatica's process bank transaction screen and we choose this company checking account, this, I always say, we're playing with monopoly money. We're playing with money that doesn't really exist within a final bank account, money that isn't generated by, let's say, Bank of America, and then money that doesn't really transfer through the PayTrace gateway. But if you notice here, we have introduced this pay trace option here at the top right, where if you were to bring in your bank statements, you'll see here, I have one for 165, 199, 165. We'll automatically bring in those pay trace batches that might be applicable to those specific bank statements. So as I click through this left side section here, you'll notice the match relevancy change here. This one's a 199 payment, and we don't have a batch for 199. So maybe there's multiple transactions that constitute this total amount. But if I come down here to our $500 example, and I look at a few batches that have quite a few matching relevancies here, you can always click into each one and see if there is a payment that transacted against a specific Acumatica document. In this case, we do have a document number. So this could be a transaction that originated out of Acumatica, and we've brought in that document number to reflect that. But you will notice that if I choose another PayTrace batch here, that this has no document number. So one of the things that we've identified are some merchants still have transactions that they're doing through a virtual terminal, or they're doing through a different avenue that isn't related to our Acumatica plugin, but they're using PayTrace for some other fashion. We won't reflect a document number because, again, it did not originate out of Acumatica, but we still want to bring those batches in here to signify what does have a document number and what does not, so that in the event it does not, you can skip over it and we can come back to the one we just saw at a prior screen, see there was a document number, and then match those line items together. So in a perfect storm, we have a $500 pay trace batch and a $500 deposit on the 15th of December 2025, and then we can click match here. And then hopefully improve the reconciliation process sometime down the road for whomever does this in their day to day, likely some finance team that does it.
And when it's not like that 100% match, Carlton, because oftentimes there's things like bank fees that might be included in some type of deposit. We have the ability to do this matching process, but then whoever the finance person is, they can come in and make any sort of manual adjustments as well to make sure that that reconciles.
There is indeed. So I don't have the permission within our Acumatica environment to have that. But if we take that 199 amount here and we actually don't have something that matches that exactly the same, this is that scenario where there is an increase in the bank deposit. But I want to look at your specific scenario, Sam, where there might be a decrease in the bank deposit and Paychex is reporting a higher amount. In that case, there can be fees, the end of month fees that are applied to the credit card processing, where you would have a number here, or not a number, a section to create a payment to reflect to a specific GL account. So that team at the end of the month can look at that specific entry created to that GL account and identify and go, hey, Sam, we're short $35 because this was our interchange fees or our credit card processing fees. And that's why these two line items have no match relevancy and why we had to bring in that additional entry to make sure it matches. And then with that, before I hand it off back to you, Sam, there's a lot of other features that we have in Acumatica that I didn't even get to scrape the surface on. So again, I do encourage if anyone has specific use cases, please bring it up to us. We're happy to do a demo more catered to your organization's needs, focus on specific requirements. And then if there is something that we don't do today that you do feel that, hey, this is very critical to our organization and our needs, our team is always happy to go through a solution discovery call with you, see what needs to happen there, and then raise it as an enhancement.
Love that.
With that being said, Sam, I'll pass this one back off to you.
Thank you. And for those of you that do want a solution discovery or anything like that, we will have some contact information shortly on how to go ahead and do that. Carlton, I know recently you were actually just at AccuConnect over in Seattle. Um, did you have the ability to do any demos live or have conversations with, financial partners or any potential users on anything that we just talked about here?
We did indeed. The traffic on the floor was pretty high, so there wasn't a lot of time, I should say, to dedicate specific demos to needs, but we had a lot of really good conversations.
Yeah.
I think being able to be face to face and really run through what does our organization struggle with from a merchant perspective, and then what can Paytrace do to help with that, it always leads to things that we don't always encounter. And I always say our product roadmap is dictated by merchant needs, not by a feature that we could tick on a box, put it on a shelf, and then hope in a year from now someone uses it. We want to know real world use cases. We want to know real world requirements and then build our application around that. So all of these conversations we had on the floor, I got to take that in with our product team, let them know, hey, we're seeing this in real time. We're seeing these people struggle with it and they really can't find a fix. Let's try to be ahead of the curve a little bit and develop our application to meet those industry expectations.
Yeah. I love that. And that's one thing, I've been pretty amazed seeing some of these conversations and demos that we've done is how consultative our approach is versus here's what we've got, make it work with what you do. It's more of what are you doing today? What works well? What do you want to change? What do you want to improve? And us fitting in our solution to match your needs. So definitely would love to have those types of conversations.
Absolutely. And then Sam, before I hand this one back off to you, I see there's two questions from Alan in the chat. I'll quickly answer it and then pass it over
Sure.
to you. The question of dual pricing or surcharge. Surcharge is in the existing development cycle that we have. So we should have surcharge coming in the near future. Any questions on that? Happy to address that after the webinar.
Mhm.
And then is there a process to get Paytrace installed on the merchant system? Absolutely. We can work with the merchant or whoever their VAR is that does their Acumatica support. We can provide them the package and then they can install that in a lower environment. And then I can run through the whole Paytrace setup with them with a sandbox account and get that all working so that they could do everything that I did today on their own time and during their validation process.
Perfect. And I'll just reiterate that first question that Alan had was which was is does this support dual pricing or surcharge? While this Acumatica solution has surcharging on the roadmap, PayTrace does support both dual pricing and surcharging through our standalone Trace AR application. So if that's something that's of kind of a urgent need, and then we can always migrate that into Acumatica or any other solution in the future, we can definitely have that conversation on what can we do now versus, you know, when that'll be developed. Cool. So I did want to take some time to talk a little bit about a couple other things that PayTrace does really well, because we're not the only Acumatica embedded payment solution, right? There are some other ones out there. So when you're looking at it, you want to choose the best one for you. And of course, I'm going to say it's going to be PayTrace. Um, but one of the things that we do really well is this thing called interchange optimization. So while we tick the boxes on everything that we talked about with cash flow improvement, efficiency, right? Less data entry, things like that. Another area that we really excel in is cost savings, right? Cost reduction. So um, we kind of dialed in on credit card processing there. One thing with card processing, especially on B2B cards, is they don't all qualify the same, right? When you take a card, you have to pay fees for that, but the fees can be dynamic depending on some different levers that you can pull. I'm not going to get too in depth on what it is and how that works, but it's essentially sending in additional line item and summary data on those transactions. Um, Typically, that can be a very tedious process, right? I've been talking about let's avoid data entry, and now I'm telling you, well, if you want to save money, you got to do extra data entry. With PayTrace, we actually have tools that can automate a lot of the line item data that's coming through and providing that to the card brands to ensure that you guys get the best qualification rates out there. So here's a chart. Visa actually very recently updated their rates on their corporate purchasing and business cards. Um, so if you are not doing any of this, what's called level three processing, um, you might be paying some very high fees, right? Upwards of 3% just on kind of those standard interchange rates. When you utilize PayTrace and you process a little bit smarter, we have the ability to drive those costs down into the 2% or even down to 1.75%, depending on the card. So for those of you that are processing, hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars in card transactions, saving 50 to 120 basis points can be significant to your bottom line, right? Especially for those that might be operating on some pretty thin margins as it is. This could be a huge, right, kind of not revenue source, but it could lead to more profitability for your business. So just something to consider there. And then the other thing that I think we excel really well at is trying to limit the amount of third-party reliances. So this solution is all built in-house, right? We own this embedded Acumatica integration. We also own all the back-end technology. So PayTrace, we actually started as a payment gateway over 20 years ago. And we have over 40,000 customers using our technology today to process their payments. So we own that. We also have the ability to do all the merchant services and the credit card processing. We kind of glazed on it a little bit, but we also do ACH processing. So we're not relying on sending you to a third party provider for that. We can do all that processing within house. So there's no finger pointing if there are any issues or disruptions. And you know that you're working with a trusted partner instead of us having to refer you elsewhere. And then as you saw, we also build out the AR technology. So when you work with PayTrace, you get that one point of contact, you get that one statement, right? It's all in that one spot. So, like I mentioned before, we've got a lot of resources out there. If you're not subscribed to any of these, strongly recommend check them out. We have a blog, so anytime we have some of these new feature enhancements to our solutions, we're going to post about them in that blog. We actually just got a new enhancement this morning I saw to our Microsoft Dynamics Business Central solution with regards to partial payments. So you'll probably hear about that pretty shortly. Um, Check out our website, a lot of great solutions and resources on there. And then we also are very active on social media, LinkedIn, YouTube. Um, this webinar will actually be hosted on YouTube and posted to our LinkedIn channel. So if you want to share it with your friends, if you jumped in here late, definitely check that out. And you can also go back and on demand watch some of our previous conversations. So with that said, if you'd like to proceed or if you want to have kind of a one-on-one dialogue with the Paytrace team, you can reach out to us. I'd recommend probably copying both of these just so we have a ton of visibility. Number one is our sales team is just sales@paytrace.com. These guys are awesome. They'll definitely take care of you or point you in the right direction depending on what you need. But then Carlton has graciously invited me to put his direct email on here, CAOrtega at paytrace.com. I mentioned at the beginning, if you are going to be on some type of demo for really any of our ERP tools, chances are Carlton's going to be driving and leading that conversation. So he has been kind enough to put himself out there and be open for those direct messages. So thank you, Carlton. At this point, we are at the end of our session. Thank you guys so much for attending this live webinar, and extra thank you to Carlton for making us look good. Really appreciate your expertise and showing us the demo.
Thanks for having me, Sam.
All right, team, we're gonna close it out, and I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your week. Take care.
Thanks all.